Hi, guys. So before we dive in, I want to share something I'm really loving right now. It's called Wilder 33, a farm to bottle apothecary line of sublingual herb remedies designed to shift your emotional state and elevate your frequency in seconds. Each formula blends organic botanicals and wild crafted flower essences to support calm, confidence, connection, and clarity, as well as my ultimate favorite love potion with Damiana and Emerald for heart clearing and magnetism. Just a few drops under the tongue is enough to feel a shift. You can explore the Wilder 33, and that's WYLDER 33.com. And as a gift to In the Nod listeners, use code NAAD20 for 20% off your order. Thanks. Enjoy. Prince Stash, thank you for joining us today on In the Nod. For those of our listeners who are not familiar with your sort of wealth of life experience, you are a true Renaissance man in terms of you're an artist, you are a playboy, you are a creative, a mystic. And so thank you for joining us. It's going to be an exciting conversation. I'm really looking forward to hearing what you have to say.
Well, yeah, thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a delight. For those of you who don't know, he is currently sitting in his castle and gracing us with his presence. A spectacular castle you have, and we'll talk a little bit about that as well. So, will you? Let's start off by getting a little bit of your background.
Right. Such as, where do we start?
Let's start with your sort of the overall history, your days with the rock and rollers, your foray into spiritualism and mysticism, your storied family. We can touch on it all.
Right. Well, I guess the interesting fact is, if we go right back to the beginning, my grandparents met in what my paternal grandparents I'm talking about met in what was then Upper Silesia, which was the part of Poland that belonged to Prussia, therefore to Germany, after the partition between Austria, Germany, and Russia. So my parents met, their families didn't approve of the match. Funnily enough, researchers unearthed their marriage certificate in London in 1904. After that, they lived in Paris, and, from 1905 to the beginning of World War I, where they, unfortunately for them, had their fortune confiscated and were forced to leave a country that they loved, and due to having the wrong passport, by the same token, grew. I was would have been born in Paris, but I was born in Switzerland instead, due to World War II, and due to the fact my father had been demobilized after being wounded on the battlefield during the Drôle de Guerre, the funny war. So
I did not know that fact.
for the army, my parents then moved eventually to Switzerland, where I was born, and
Prince Stash, move closer to the microphone. We can't hear you.
okay, so sorry about that.
It's quite all right.
Yeah, so being born, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Being born in Switzerland, I was very much an international, in an international set. Grew up in circumstances which are more akin to the 18th and 19th century than what is thought to be the 20th century, because it was a bygone era of lots of huge staff and
Which is the
you know,
grandeur of the lifestyle.
a very a grand lifestyle in terms of the beauty of the places we inhabited, including Lord Byron's Villa Diodati, which he had decorated in 1816, where Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein, and and on and on. You know, where so many the concept of the vampire was born, and all that kind of thing.
Yes, well, we're going to definitely dive into the
Yeah.
concept
So,
of the
so
vampire.
that was sort of my background, and I went to various boarding schools in Switzerland, then had a tutor in England, and that gave me very much an edge because the, the love of learning was instilled in me, and I was able to to be not just a schoolboy learning facts to pass exams, but to learn how to think and and to read interesting material and so I was mm, fortunately when I did return to conventional schooling, it was so boring that by divine mercy, I was discovered by Luchino Visconti's assistant in 1959 on Via Veneto in Rome, and it was my mother who agreed that I should do a test. Nothing came of it, but I was plunged in the Dolce Vita world, and soon was hobnobbing with all these international movie stars and extraordinary society, and went to Paris, still in my late teens, and was moving around this world. I was with Fellini when the Dolce Vita won the Palme d'Or in 1960 at the 13th Cannes Film Festival, and so and I lived at Alain Delon's house in the country, and all these different things, and hobnobbed with all those type of people, including African American famous jazz people. I was much more interested in artists, poets, musicians than I was in society people for the most part. The kind of semi-mode type of people that I knew were all controversial figures like Obirosa and people like that.
Right. Um, that world of sort of what would you call it? I don't know, but it was grandeur and decadence, and it was very insular and very international. It seems to have dissipated into a very sort of modernized world where we're all connected, not necessarily through intellect or sophistication, but through social media.
Well, yes, and of course, this dreadful sort of social world which is based where
It's all monetized.
where parties need to be for a reason. The sheer for the hell of it, for pleasure, is now. People feel guilty in a sense, in a weird way. I mean, about
About
fortune.
being decadent, about right, and or about
And they're not decadent. Usually, I mean, I wrote a piece, but it was years ago before the internet, saying that unfortunately, I've known very few people who owned their fortunes. Most people were owned by their fortune. In other words, that
oh,
people
I get
were
it.
not never able to enjoy what they had because they had to. A fortune is a very hard taskmaster. So I learned all these things. Now it's very different. You have the digital nomads. You have people doing business,
Well,
uh,
there was also a
great
time.
fortunes, but they don't. To my my qualms with most people of wealth is that they're not very stylish or no.
Well, exactly. They're inelegant, they're unsophisticated, and they're culturally sort of lacking. And if you go into their homes, they generally all look alike. You know, they're,
They're decorated by others.
they're decorated by others, cultivated by others, their art's picked out by their decorators. So it's a that whole world seems to have gone. And I don't know what happened. Is it that money became the center of what made people interesting as opposed to people being interesting?
Well, money ceased to be, perhaps, I mean, the theory is that money ceased to be the means to fuel a lifestyle, and money became an object in its own right. So the accumulation of it led to people being rather boring about it, really.
I couldn't agree with you more. I
Yeah,
couldn't agree. It's
and
just boring.
and then there is
I love you for saying that, by the way.
there's
So well articulated.
yeah, there's a rather dreadful sort of spirit abroad, when at the recent wedding of Bezos in Venice, there was social protests. I mean, I found the fact that people protested somebody's ability to, I find this world being so mean spirited in a
And
way
judgmental.
that people always want to pick. The first thing they said about me when I accidentally became a so-called grand influencer due to friends coming to stay with me and say, "Oh, let's do these social media posts and so on," and it happened to take off. It was fun to do and everything. It wasn't something that I wanted to do professionally by any stretch of the imagination. But that's the way this whole uh, this entire thing, that the press took a great deal of interest in me, and then TV in Italy did did a whole story, and the gist of it was that there was an underlying tone. Well, he doesn't have to. They know nothing. They just assume that you don't have to work, and they're jealous of that. Nobody knows what I actually do. These are not things that one actually talks about. They just assume that you're just a playboy, whereas the playboy mask was one that I defiantly wore for very specific reasons. I
Which
thought
was
it was fun to deflect the boring conversations one would have with people who knew nothing about esotericism. And so it was much easier to deflect it with this Playboy mask. But, I'm not denying the.
well, wasn't wearing it also fun? I mean, there was something.
Of
What?
course, it's fun, but what I mean is it's a device. And, I quoted Oscar Wilde in a sense that in this he quoted it in different circumstances, but it happens to fit that in such an age, everyone needs masks.
Yes, we need several.
Exactly.
We need several. Um, where did that quote from Oscar Wilde come from? I actually don't know that one, but I mean, I'm a fanatical student of his.
The witch?
The quote. Do you recall?
Yes, it was a letter. It's the quote
De profundis?
from Oscar Wilde is from a
De
letter
prof-
to Rich.
was it de profundis?
No, no, no.
Okay.
It's a letter that he wrote. And
Um,
I happened to have found it, and I quoted it on several occasions, and even in a film I, uh, which I directed and played, in fact, two parts, a double role in it. So it was fun.
oh, fascinating.
And to get back to the drift nowadays, is that people seem to be envious if they feel that you do not have to work for a living. That's what the tyranny of work they talk. In fact, nobody knows that I do uh, work of very different stripes. But I do, I'm not just a gentleman of leisure, as they say.
Well, do you think that perhaps it's what you do that doesn't satisfy what they need? For example, they don't consider what you do working because it's not what they do. I mean, it's a very judgy society. And if people don't,
Well, I don't care about society, to be quite honest.
nor do I.
I find society and their mores and the entire thing. I'm very much a transgressive person, and
As are we on this podcast.
right. Well, good.
Yeah, that's why we thought you'd be a perfect guest. So what has changed in the norms of society? How has it done such a 180?
It's probably a mixture of misguided uh, socialist ideas uh, corrupted by a strand of moralistic capitalism. You know,
Moralistic
it's
capitalism, exactly.
it's some weird thing that
Morphed.
you need to justify, and people love to show off. But oh, when I first came to LA, for instance, in this present incarnation, as I call it, because I was there at different eras, but in 1988, I happened to have gone to LA for a film project. And when I had settled in what then became my Malibu beach house, um, I began receiving these very grand invitations, but they were invariably for some incredibly dull so-called charity organization of
So
some sort.
they were in essence a way of virtue signaling and giving them permission to have a grand party, as long as it was
And
attached to a cause.
and exactly, and absurd prices. You buy a table, for $250,000 or something like that. I mean, it was just ludicrous. And then there was a man who went to jail, in fact, who fell the victim. I watched this case in absolute dismay of a man who uh, became a victim of being involved in this so-called charity business organization, and he the kind of thing, the machinations that went behind the scenes with various people will donate, quote unquote, their services, but then want you to pay for this and that, and it ends up being extremely costly. And politicians and various stripes of celebrities showing up. I mean, one sees the point of all these
Can't hear you, darling. Yeah.
for people organizing that.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, and I want to go back to this aspect of sort of life as it was when there was some sort of grandeur and elegance, and even the way we lived. Even the way we lived, like when I look back on the way my parents entertained and hosted, it was so different than it's done now. And the guests were chosen differently. It was more about who could bring something to the conversation as opposed to bringing in bold-faced names. And I think that to some degree that was what bothered people about the Bezos wedding. Not that anyone had a right to give a shit what he was doing in his personal life, but it seemed like it was just sort of filled with celebrities, and it was more of an Oscar, more of an Oscars than an intimate celebration of love and beauty. And again, no one has the right to choose, but it seemed again that the guests are not chosen based on what they bring to the table in terms of uh, achievement and intellect. It's more about who they are and the bold-faced name and what kind of attention that could bring to the press or an evening post on Instagram.
Right. But, that again, even that is not as reprehensible as the fact that you have to somehow justify these things and that people protest just because one has
Agreed.
money. And
Agreed.
I'll give you.
But I'm saying, and I agree with you, but on the same token, it creates very uninteresting groups of people at the same time. Dinner parties are much less interesting. The conversations are much less topical or esoteric, and they tend to be more about what people are doing and what people have. And I think that that becomes so unbearably painful that I'd rather sit home and read.
That's correct. And in fact, to be at places where people want to know what you do rather than what you what it is you may be behind all the trappings of how one looks and the rest of it is very unfortunate because what one does has absolutely nothing to do
With who one is.
with who one is and what one is, rather than who one is.
And we don't challenge each other to come up with interesting answers anymore because what you do is a very simple answer. And it ultimately turns into a sales pitch versus who you are can take you down a really interesting rabbit hole, that goes for an entire meal where you're just sitting and sort of discovering each other. There's no discovery in talking about what you do for a living.
Yeah, mind you,
Come closer to the microphone, darling.
I
Thank you.
was recently at a very interesting dinner in Todi, which is a nearby uh, lovely, lovely place in Umbria, about 50 minutes away from me. Uh, Zoe, do you know who Zoe Baird is?
No. Tell me who she is.
Was she's a remarkable woman who was once tipped to be attorney general and who was forced to be withdrawn because of the nanny gate scandal.
Oh, I do remember that.
She is a particularly interesting person with a wonderful family and great friends, and she gives very interesting parties where there's great entertainment and where the conversation is invariably first class. So that's we can't
And that is a rarity.
we can't just dismiss everybody. It's very unlikely, but it is there too.
Oh, of course it is.
A lot of people say, a lot of snobby Europeans say, "What are you doing in California?" I mean, and they love to quote Stein and "there's no there," and all that sort of.
Right.
And I am absolutely compelled to reply that I have more interesting friends in California than I have all over Europe because, so called intellectuals can be just as boring as your crass capitalists.
Well, there's that great, I think it's a Frank Lloyd Wright comment. He says, if you turn the world on its side, all the loose change will fall in California.
There is a lot of remarkable people. The fact is that one may know them and one may not see them at all. That's a different.
Well, yes, it's an insular. So yes, it's insular here. So access.
Life has become, due to modern circumstances, the more we had connectivity, as we're speaking now through Zoom, or we have smartphones of all stripes, and we can instantly communicate. But then people are hypnotized by their phones, and at social gatherings, people also cannot resist being on their phones.
Well,
So that
in addition to, the pros of the social connectivity, I mean, while we're on Zoom, what's clearly missing between us is an exchange of energy, an energetic exchange. And I don't think that you can there's no way to say that that is not an invaluable aspect of human connection. I mean, it turns on all sorts of hormonal, pheromonal things within one's body, and that's lost when I'm looking at you at a screen. I mean, I can see that you're a handsome devil and very elegant, and that your surroundings are beautiful. But by the same token, I'm not. Your energetic field is intangible to me. Now, I know some people can read through that. I have a hard time with it. I like
but I
touch
mean,
and feel.
it is a huge progress over doing over, you know, I grew up in a time when the phone was or was something that you had to crank a handle and get the operator on the line to have a local number. So, and international calls were a real challenge. In the early 60s, for example, it was almost impossible to call America, and you had to call with this kind of special. You had to get the operator to ask for your party and all that. Otherwise, you would just end up uh, spending, wasting huge amounts of money just to be connected to New York or
But
anything.
look, but everything has its pros and cons. So while you may be able to connect with more people, perhaps the level of intimacy which with each of those individuals isn't quite as intense.
Now, the word intimacy is very overrated, in my opinion.
Oh, really?
There's many levels because people think that uh, there is intimacy in knowing people, but knowing them biblically and without even knowing their names may give you a greater intimacy than being with a partner, for instance.
So are we talking about the one night stand?
The so-called one-night stand, which is very ill. The word, the appellation is very. I found in my life, in my experience, some of those so-called one-night stands, sexual or not, to have been the most enriching, intimate
I agree with you.
ever.
I
And
agree with you.
and because what a lot of people, virtue signaling people, especially those who talk about being heart-centered and don't know what the heart means esoterically speaking, and so on, and they all confuse sentimentality and emotionalism with spirituality. California is horrendous for that kind of
I
thing.
could You're spot on, my friend. You are spot on.
And so-called intimacy, with in monogamy or anything like that, is very often a complete misnomer because in your own family, the people who know you the least are those who think they know you the best.
It's so true. Or they know one of the masks, and that's
Yeah,
it.
they're blinded by their so-called knowledge.
Correct. Correct. There's a freedom in in those uh those moments, those heightened short moments, and where one can be themselves or one can act like that person that they want to be. There's so many different ways of of navigating what one might call the one night stand, but it could be a very loving, very intimate, very freeing uh, release of all types of energy. I mean, I find that when I look back on some of those days in my youth, um, they're the strongest memories I have because I was allowed to be who I wanted to be in those moments.
There you go. And it's also a question of uh, of being the famous thing that Krishnamurti calls freedom from the known, which is one of the basic problems with so-called knowledge. Knowledge of a certain kind hinders one. There's a sort of ring pass not of intellectual knowledge in certain disciplines, which hinders true progression, of true unfoldment. Progression is a bad word because I find that people think or find that there is so-called spiritual progress, whereas it's an unfoldment like a flower opening from bud to full flowering.
It's
Uh,
more simplistic than progress. It's actually an opening.
yes, exactly.
It's an opening.
And then uh, different different energies, different people bring different things out of one. I'm talking
Precisely.
to you, even though we're across the screen, but you're bringing to the fore a different quality that maybe some other person in similar circumstances would not evoke.
But we
It's
just tap into different fields.
exactly.
Yeah, I think it's true, and I think it's fascinating, and I love your take on things, especially sort of the modern world, because you bring a very pragmatic take on it. I mean, it's not judgmental, it's just pragmatic. And I think
Mm.
that you're right. I think sort of education and the teachings as we have them now or have boxed us in. We've become incapable of critical thinking and looking outside the box. And I
I
don't
don't
know
know
how that
because
happened.
I had the privilege of uh, being circumstances, my inspiration for a journey to the East that uh, took place in 1968, where instead of going on tour, on a major rock and roll tour, I decided, inspired by Lama Anagarika Govinda's book, The Way of the White Clouds, I decided that that's really what I wanted to do, that I was a prisoner of love. I had this path opening, which didn't quite meet uh, what one aspired to at that time, especially as psychedelics had somewhat uh, sabotaged the scaffolding of one's superego. So,
Mm.
there was a certain thirst for something which
That
is,
seeking, that deeper knowledge,
and,
that
and I
enrichment.
ended up responding to an invitation from a very great spiritual master in India, and then once going attempting to go on a yogi pilgrimage with a bunch of extraordinary hardy yogi pilgrims. But the man who was organizing the whole thing died when I got to the place where I was going,
Oh, wow.
in the foothills of the Himalayas. And I had met by, nothing is accidental, but I'd met a person who was still a friend of mine who said, "Oh, you're going to that place. Well, across in another valley in the Kuman Himalayas, is where Lama Govinda lives. I said, oh, he was the inspiration for my coming to the East in the first place and my wishing to go on this Tibetan pilgrimage. So when those drastic circumstances happened, I went to see Lama Govinda, who immediately, when I got to the door, I mean, it's a very long story with all sorts of amazing details, but make it as short as I can. When he opened the door and I introduced myself, he swiveled on one foot and said, I know exactly. And as he did that, he said, I know exactly who you are. And he pulled the book behind him off a shelf, opened it at a page in a synchronous movement. And it was a letter from Rainer Maria Rilke to Audrey Gide about my family, about my father and
Fascinating.
all who were very young at that time, about my grandfather and so on. So it was extraordinary, and I became this Tibetology student. I learned a great deal from him and was able to then go and study in various monasteries and sacred texts, and eventually in Nepal, I was the acolyte and the special student of a great tantric master, uh, and therefore my instructions in these matters make everything that whole ersatz type of take on better sex through tantra that is current in California ridiculous, and how Vajrayana has a terrible reputation.
Wait, so you're saying the red tantric has been distorted by Californian teachings? Is that what you're saying?
What I'm saying is that the Western mind is incapable of apprehending
Correct.
the kind of cultural differences that exist within a certain Tibetan teaching, which lacks any kind of attachment or sentimentality. It's as you use the word pragmatic. It's pragmatic in the sense that uh, there are no physical or ecstatic emotions that should distract one from the task at hand. And therefore, if sexual practices are used, those are nothing to do with having a relationship. A lot of Western women, especially, felt used and misused in engaging with Eastern masters who were incapable of judging the differences in mentality, and that
I
was
agree, and
uh,
it's in
it,
in my in my yogic practice, we're sort of pushed to engage in sexual activity because it moves the chi, it moves the energy throughout your body, and that's
when you're saying, may I ask which practice?
I study Kundalini, and
What yogi bhajans?
well, it was Yogi Bhajans, but my teacher was a woman named Guru Jagat,
Yes.
and
Did you know about? No, it's amusing because it's the lineage of yogi bhajan, right?
yes, I look, I'm into it. I know all the rumors.
Don't apologize. Yogi Bhajan was a very close friend of mine. I met him before I met Yogi Bhajan, before he even was,
A guru.
went to no, he was a guru. He was the guru of the Canadian High Commissioner in New Delhi.
Yeah. Oh, I'm dying to hear this. How fascinating.
Yeah, and Yogi Bhajan was at the time a high official in customs
That is correct.
at New Delhi airport, and that's how we met. And I was on my way to Nepal, and he said, "Can I need to have a conversation with you?" And I thought, "Oh no!" I was immediately thinking, "Oh my God, some Indian person who wants to ask me what is the principal crop in your country or something of that nature." And I was amazed when it started off on an esoteric level immediately. he wrote down in a little book that I still have it, which is actually in this library where we're sitting in right now, where he wrote down this mantra, which you know, of course, and this Eshtang mantra. And he also wrote down the address he would be at in Canada. Now, John Philip Law, who, you know, this magnificent actor uh, who did many wonderful things in America, but then had a bigger career in Europe and what is um, quite overlooked in the history of film. John Philip Law was a great friend of mine because he was the angel in Barbarella with Jane Fonda and all that.
Oh, right, of
He's also a great friend of mine. Was shooting in Rome. He was married to Jane Fonda at the time, and so he picked me up at the airport in 1970. He was going to film in Italy and Yugoslavia and so on, and I was going to stay at his Miller Drive house off Sunset, and he picked me up at the airport. I was quite jet lagged, so I wasn't really paying attention to everything he was saying. And at some point, the mantra came out of his mouth, and I said, "Where did you hear that?" I got all excited, and he said, "You haven't been listening. I told you I've been spending a lot of time with this Indian guru." And so I tell him the story I just told you, and he says, "Well, let's go." My luggage is still in the car, and we swung by Yogi Bhajan's house, which was off Sunset, you know, slightly south.
Was it by Robertson?
No, it was just in a one of those little streets, just sort of south of Sunset.
Got it.
You know,
Yep.
in that neighborhood, not far from.
The Gurdwara?
Yeah, it was, but he also had the ashram,
Right.
Jules Buccieri's furniture store there on what beginning of Melrose, you know, and we went there all the time. So basically, when I walked in, Yogi Bhajan looked at me and said, "What took you so long?" Right? Because this was 2 years later, virtually 2 years later, not quite.
Well, in his time, no time at all, right? Time doesn't move the way it's not so linear.
So we had, before 3H Show became a big deal and everything like that, he was developing the thing. We saw each other every single day while I was doing a whole bunch of things in LA that year. I was, amongst other things, I worked on this film with Vadim, which we developed at MGM, called Pretty Maids All in a Row, which I actually chose to do. I thought it would be fun. Gene Roddenberry was the official writer on that and the producer. And I was also in a film, in a cult movie, which has many
Love the word cult.
Tolstoyan things. And this cult film called Saturation 70. And I also toured with Joe Cocker, Mad Dogs and Englishmen. Did a few gigs with them.
That sounds...
That was all at 1970, you know, those months of 1970 in LA. 6-7 months I was there.
Well, I love talking about sort of the weaponization of sexuality and of sex, and how, I mean, Yogi Bhajan is a perfect example. Let me see, of how we've taken something that happened in the 70s, whether it happened or not, I don't know. I don't really believe these stories about him, to be perfectly honest with you. And even if I did, I think they're actually irrelevant to the teachings. And you separate the man from the teachings. And as far as I'm concerned, and I've studied lots of different modalities, I believe Kundalini, as taught by Yogi Bhajan, has been the most effective and transformative for me. So,
And it certainly had uh, a great it had a great influence, and it's very different from the Tibetan form, but it was an excellent discipline, and what it became and how it became and how it developed is beyond the scope of this conversation. I refuse to get into the moralistic issues, like I refuse this infuriating politicizing of people such as Evola, who happened to that he was a fascist and a Nazi sympathizer, and all these other things, these labels that have been stuck on him, doesn't dilute the fact that he was one of the most knowledgeable of anybody who's ever written about those matters. Those
well, the cancel culture has really impacted our ability to extract what people say from who people are. I mean, we're all just in this human incarnation. We're all vulnerable. We all make mistakes. We all say things that we regret, especially as we're younger. That's part of the journey of this life. And to really dismiss what people say of value is we're doing such a disservice to humanity. It's an enormous disservice.
it's all irrelevant.
It's all irrelevant.
Ridiculous, because
They're distractions.
levels, and there are many levels to somebody, and what their politics are and all that is ridiculous to get mixed up. But that's the way they think nowadays. Oh, this guy was a fascist.
Right. It's unconsciousness masked as consciousness.
Yeah. And as you said, you use the words that are very dear to my heart. Virtue. I despise virtue signaling more than anything else.
But I'm loving you, by the way. You are making me laugh. Like I didn't know how this interview was going to go because I mean, Joe was originally going to do it. But the more I talk to you and the more we sort of unpeel the onion, I'm just loving everything you say. Completely aligned with your point of view.
Likewise, I love everything that you stand for, which is that is. I'm a relic from a bygone age, but you're living in today's world, and it's remarkable to keep your freedom and everything. And women are under this dreadful sort of assignment to be a certain way and to be really.
Yes, we think that feminism means being the man that you feel oppressed you so deeply. It's such a mischaracterization of, I mean, holding on to one's femininity is a gift, and I think that the gender displacement or our misunderstanding of our roles or trying to reassign our roles is really something that I'm very concerned with, because I believe that once you are stripped of your identity, they can do anything can happen to you, right? Then you lose your grounding.
Right. Well, it's really, really deplorable. But you should have you looked at my Substack page, because
I saw that you have one, and I would love to do a deep dive. I love Substack.
Because on Substack I have I think in the next couple of 2 or 3 weeks, that the end of this novella that I wrote a long time ago, which is the most transgressive text. I mean, a lot of people will take exception to its language and everything.
I love that you say transgression proudly.
What it does is it postulates the real character who's at the center of this novella is the goddess. And the goddess in this case is the goddess of sex and love, but of a love which is absolutely merciless, and it doesn't accept possession. It refuses jealousy. She is marvelously on the face of it perverse, but that
Have you named her?
aspect.
Have you named?
Yes, she's Venus, but she's a Venus. She's an extremely merciless sort of goddess whose perversity, whose innate perversity is that she needs to she needs to transgress the fact that being divine prevents one from certain experiences. So she loves all sorts of excesses and to live vicariously through other emanations of her.
Fascinating.
And so the character I feel you would be one of the right people to understand as opposed to understanding. You can't stand under, but you can understand these things. You would, because in a sense I see within you this this manifestation as well. That flame, that very flame burns within you. I can see.
I feel it.
So when you're speaking to me of her character, I'm already feeling like sort of the embodiment of it.
Yeah, yeah.
And proudly, very proudly.
Yeah. And she doesn't she doesn't allow these sentimentality, and she says it's very tiresome, but I don't want to, I don't want to spoiler alerts. I don't want to tell you what it's about. Just
Is it published yet on Substack?
it's, yes, most of it has been the last in the next 3 weeks the whole thing will have been complete. But
So it's a series. It's a series.
Yes, they've serialized it, but I finished it. Oddly enough, it was a thing I began long time ago, because my brother and I shared a place where he went to work. It was my mother's pied-à-terre in Paris, which she rented from the widow of Georges Bataille, because my mother wanted an elegant way of helping her very close friend financially without appearing to do so. So she said, "Oh, I need this apartment," but of course she didn't need it at all. But it was a way to funnel funds to this to Diane Bataille, who was a Kuchube princess, Russian by descent, and she was a marvelous character. And we lived. So this apartment that my mother had taken contained all of Bataille's papers, including in which there was a draft of Aubrey Beardsley's Under the Hill, which is an unfinished novella. And that was the inspiration for a cinematic idea, which evolved into a script whereby the character of Tannhauser is, we said, oh, a very famous Minas singer, troubadour, would today be a rock and roll superstar at the time, so in the 70s. So thought, oh yeah, so the script evolved along those lines, and then in 1980 I had begun writing in order to I needed to get over some issue, and I thought, oh, you know what? Writing prose is very liberating because you can actually express thoughts and things like that.
Yeah, it's cathartic.
Yeah, very cathartic.
So when we started the Substack thing, there was this thing called Confessions of a Living Legend, which was very funny because my agent at the time there was a tabloid guy in England called Don Short, and I said, Confessions of a Living Legend, you want to call my book that? He said, yeah. He said, yeah, mate, you're a legend, right? And you're still alive, so it's Confessions of a Living Legend. That's it. And so we, in honor of Don Short, the title was retained. It has this humorous idea, and so that's my Substack line, which has some various articles, various.
So is that how we find you on Substack?
Yes, Confessions of a Living Legend.
Wonderful.
And there's reminiscences, there's extracts from a long suffering book of reminiscences, which I've yet to complete it, but I did this year, 2025, complete this novella I was telling you about. And
I can't wait to dive in.
It took me very surprising things. In fact, when I get back to LA, I want to have a, really beautiful letterpress edition and high-end type of thing, and distribute it in that way, in a very private type of thing.
Well, I do have a lovely place here. If you want to host a party here or a book signing or something of that nature, I'd love to host you.
And you'll have to come to this meeting when I'm back in LA.
When will that be? Do you know?
I don't think until next year, because quite honestly, I'm staying here. I'm staying in Italy until the end of the year, and then I'm going to Switzerland for Christmas. And after Switzerland, I'll be right back to LA.
Well, think of me, and I'm also friendly with Lee McCloskey, and he's been to my home.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Lee is the person that we
Oh.
group together, and he and I. Haven't you seen the conversation?
I have. I just didn't know that that's who you were speaking about, but yes. And
Lee's my best friend.
well, I can see
Do
why.
Lee's my best friend, and we are very much. He's the only person that I can really talk to, at length.
Well, he's
So profound. And
Well, then why don't you come to the Tuesday nights there?
his group. I would love to. I have been to one or two.
Yeah.
I have been to one or two. But I would really like to meet you in person when you're here. I mean, that would be so exciting for me.
We'll do that. We'll do that when I get back. Can't anticipate. You never.
No, we don't have to look too far in the future, but it'll happen when you're here. It was lovely, lovely meeting you.
Lovely meeting you too.